consent. Now, the first speaker should be Gianluigi Albano from Consip, but we don't have the connection. So we have to call him because he was saying otherwise we can go.
I can perhaps say a little bit more about what we did before and what we figured out in the CBB project as well. We had this comparative analysis where we were also asking, elements about framework agreements from different member states, and we could really see that practices was very different in. It's going. Yeah, like some member states use it a lot, like in Denmark, more than around 50% or something of the framework agreement. And we could also see that some member states barely use them at all. And we were wondering why that was the case. And this time we wanted to dig in a little bit more. Maybe it has something to do with how we define a framework agreement. And this could be also interesting to talk about. And then we also saw that, new techniques and DPS and stuff like that is also something that is not gaining any attention in many member states. And then we have the Scandinavian countries and a few more where it's beginning to attract. And this sort of maybe builds upon bigger experience with centralization in general. So we build upon the knowledge and the experience that we have to add new things. And it could be interesting just to also hear a bit on these things. Yeah, is he coming online now?
Yeah. He told me 5 minutes, but
yeah. Yeah.
I already told you that Gianluigi is working with Consip, but he was previously he was teaching I think in London at UCL. Previously in something like 20 or 15 years ago, and then he came back in Italy and worked at Consip first in the kind of a study office, a study service. And then during the COVID period, he was responsible for acquisitions. So the tough period was on him to buy all the, not for medicines, because they didn't buy medicines. Medicines were bought by Italian local CPBs, which are linked with local regional health systems. But he was his staff to buy all the machines for breathing and all the other things for COVID. And after that, he asked it to be moved to a more quiet office.
Understandable.
And he sent some slides,
yes,
which we can perhaps try to. Or is it better for him?
Probably. The slides helps him to.
Yes, but can we
read?
Yes, can we publish or share them? Okay, can you see the concept slides? Yeah. Okay. Well, no, I would try to swap and begin with France, but the problem is that Jean-Luc has a meeting with his director at 10, so we don't have time. 10, 15, something like that. So he will just play as first place for this reason. So he will arrive soon, very soon. And yeah, he was. As I told you, this is an Italian company, so have some
Flexibility.
possible modifications. By the way. Yes, also Karina told me that we have prepared those questions, but as it was explicitly written, they are not compulsory, but just to give you a hint of what could have been the issues to be treated. In fact, we realized that it's much more fruitful to have people or speakers speak without a specific track to follow, because it comes out much better what are the real local problems. You know that usually to prepare questionnaires is a very, very difficult task. If you have in mind your problem, and you cannot discover what are the other people's problems. And it happens always in comparative law. The most difficult thing is to prepare questionnaires, and they don't have to be too tight. Otherwise, you just impose some views of the legal problems, which are typically of your legal system, not necessarily have the same parameters as other legal systems. So the nice thing is also to know what are the questions in your system. And I would stress also the last question, which is the one, well, the last two questions, which is oh, okay, the origin. So remember.
Apologies, my heartfelt apologies for being late.
Okay, don't worry. We are still on time. Thank you for participating, and thank you for your slides. You prefer to share from your computer, because we already have.
I'll guess I use my own computer, and I'm gonna open the presentation that I sent you
Great.
yesterday. So okay, here we go. Okay, so this is open. Okay, so I guess you will be able to see it.
Not yet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so do you want me to go the presentation mode or the standard mode? This is okay?
Yes.
Great.
Okay. So, well, okay. So, thanks for having me, at least online. And thanks, Mario, for the kind invite. And again, apologies for it's been a long trip back, although I was in Paris, but actually it turns out to be sometimes more complicated than going to New York. So pleasure being here. So the Mario asked me to sort of provide a presentation which is sort of a weird animal in between presentation which is has some institutional features concerning the company for which I work, which is Consip, and using it as a sort of Trojan horse to make some, I would say, more possibly academic considerations on why we do the things in the way we do them, and especially concerning the techniques for demand aggregation. So for the curiosity and of the audience, I have put arguably more slides that I'm going to use. There are some slides basically providing a picture of Consip, what Consip does. And the only one I'm really interested in is to, especially for the academic audience, which is arguably virtually the whole audience today. I want to share one feature using just figures from the last few years to show that Consip, alongside with many other CPBs in Europe, has been moving away, or at least in a way, or enlarging the portfolio of solution provided to the public sector, both central government and local government. In that, 10 years ago, we used to be considered, a machine for providing framework agreements for demand aggregation, large contracts, depending, I'm going to spend a few words on different natures, but that was it. I mean, over the years, and you can see by having a snapshot only at the sort of bluish tab areas, we've been expanding all the tools that are supposed to provide public organizations with more leverage, with more degrees of freedom. So what we call negotiating tools, such as the e-marketplace, which is a sort of Amazon-like, very simplified and less fancy, to be honest, version of Amazon for low-value contracts, and the dynamic purchasing system, which is mainly for pharmaceuticals. Okay, although there are also ICT contracts, mainly ICT equipment. Most of transactions are transactions in the healthcare sector. So, and this is, if you look at what happened in 2022, that will give you the idea of a award which is really split in two parts. Half of it is made of purchasing solutions like large framework agreements. Another half, dynamic purchasing system, marketplace, and bespoke contracts on behalf of specific public entities. So this says one thing. So the conclusion of these slides is that demand aggregation can be implemented in a variety of ways, and sometimes there are natural limits or natural boundaries because there are other objectives like providing a variety of solutions to public organization. It's sometimes very difficult to pursue this objective by using large contracts. So you have to allow, public organizations to do at least partially their own business, so to tailor their contract. This is one thing. So if you're interested in the kind of the nature of the contracts, but that's just it's an aside. It's not really relevant. The only thing that I want to mention is the second thing I want to mention is this concept now is one of the few large CPBs that basically covers the three areas of public procurement: so goods, service, and civil works. So we do not award framework agreements in civil works because there is, in fact, in Italy a big CPB doing that right now, which is Invitalia, another state-owned enterprise, which is under the property of the Ministry of Economy and Finance, as we are. But there is indeed a part of our electronic marketplace for civil works, where contracting authorities can, award their own contract up to the threshold, and the threshold is in fact very high. If you look at the number of contracts in the civil work area, almost 80%, 85% are below that threshold. So in principle, they could use a platform to award contract very easily and very swiftly, actually. Still, we have difficulties in convincing public administrators they have an advantage in using our platform for below the threshold contracts. But this is something important because the domain of civil works was considered some sort of kind of unforbidden, the forbidden city for until 2020. Okay. Another big concern about CPBs, the role SMEs. I have unfortunately only numbers about the fraction of bidders, of sort of awardees in our world. So this is looks like a very optimistic figure, but in reality, the value of contracts, it's the other way around. So normally SMEs come up with 30% of the value of contracts, whereas in terms of numbers, they're actually the overwhelming majority. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that there is really a notion of SMEs working as subcontractors. You can see these. I've put figures in the table below to show that, in fact, I mean, to give you an idea, the value of authorized subcontracts was in 2020 more than 1 billion. And 15 years ago, that number was exactly the overall value of framework agreements awarded by contract. So nowadays, it's just the value of awarded subcontracts. This is to give you an idea of sort of ramping up of our activities. And in the past 15 years, we moved from, I would say, an annualized value of contracts that was at that time around 2 billion euros to 25 billion euros, which is projected to be as close as possible to 30 billion at the end of this year. Okay, which is, in terms, if you're not impressed by the absolute value, I mean, it's still 1.4% of GDP and more than 10% of the public procurement spend in Italy in 2022. So that gives you an idea. So the standard criticism would be, I can hear, I can hear in my ears voices coming from a couple of academics in the UK that I won't mention for, here, saying, oh, the big role of CPB, blah, 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 anti-competitive, all this and that. But because they, many of them don't look at figures, unfortunately. So the overall value of contract is 25 billion, but not even half of this is goes through large framework agreements. And let me add that if you take those 10, 11 billion and you split this money into different categories, you will see that there is at least 4 billion every year in natural gas and electricity, which to the best of my knowledge is not exactly the market we consider, a non-competitive market. So, leaving kind of these things aside, which are normally the outcome of lack of knowledge of numbers. But I want to make it clear that there is a variety. This word is the word of CPBs. Yesterday I was in Paris at the OECD meeting with other colleagues from other CPBs in Europe, and there is a sort of a common trend in the way we are moving, although we're not coordinating ourselves, but sort of a natural, spontaneous evolution of what we do. This is sort of the logic of the way we set up framework agreements, but the thing I want to sort of, the logical framework we use, we normally think of, this is kind of personal approach to framework agreements, to looking at the 5 different families that you know perfectly well. So I don't need to dwell on this and spend any time. The only thing I want to show you is that the sort of the starting point when we think of how to handle a particular market or mixture market, because sometimes we come up with solutions, addressing themselves to different markets at the same time, is to, we've been using this picture for a while now. This is, I don't want to say this is the conclusive way. I mean, after this, there is not an automatic solution. We don't use a chat GPT to come up with a framework agreement design, unfortunately. And I think that for many years, we're not going to use any artificial intelligence solution to design a framework agreement, fortunately. Actually, that's very good for my job. This is to say that there is a logical picture in which we get the main features or what we gather for public authorities in terms of how different are their needs, or not only in terms of taking a picture, but how they pretend that their needs are, which is a different thing, right? Because needs are not given. I mean, needs are, transferred to us through surveys and other ways of communication. So sometimes we do know they pretend that their needs are more heterogeneous than they need to be, but this is an input for us. And on the other side, we put, a picture of, market intelligence analysis will tell us whether the market is specialized, fragmented, whether there are many international bidders with a lot of, Italian subsidiaries. What is the power? What is the sort of, the degree of aggressiveness of SMEs, associations, so on and so forth. We put this together, and normally we have an idea how to look for the most appropriate solution dependent on this basic picture. Now we have to add on top of this picture many other features that I will not have time to mention, depending on transaction costs, depending, let me mention one simple case. If you suppose you come up with the idea that there is, it's really would be appropriate to have a multi-award framework agreement with the second round of competition. The second round of competition would require public authority to spend time and resources, at least adjusting and filling in your, fine-tuning conditions. And there are situations in which public authority, especially central government bodies, don't want to do it. Just refuse to put, because they don't have resources, they don't have a clue, they don't want to be bothered, they have other things to do, especially now under the time constraint that we have in terms of using the funds coming from the National Plan for Reconstruction and Resilience. So the 200 billion euro coming from Brussels for sort of rejuvenating our nation and most of our infrastructure, especially in healthcare and in the ICT sector, so in the digital administration, so to make our administration more digital. So they don't have time constraint, inability to handle sophisticated contracts, sometimes put us in a condition to bend and twist the right solution, favoring a suboptimal solution that we know is in principle suboptimal solution, but this is done because we are asked to do so. So if you want to know a little bit more how we come up with solutions, I've put here some examples of what we do. I have to say that over the years, we haven't found any other way of handling electricity, natural gas, or lunch coupons than using frame contract. Frame contract is the standard, single award framework agreement with fixed conditions. So no, there's only one winner for each lot, which is normally a geographical lot, and that's it. So at the call-off stage, there is only a purchasing order or task order, the way our US colleagues will call it. What we've been doing over the years is to expand the solution, especially in the healthcare sectors, by using multi-award framework agreements with fixed conditions. And again, and how we award call-offs is mainly by use three mechanisms: by using shares, so by splitting the overall value of the framework agreement, saying 3 shares, 50, 30, and 20, and using the ranking and allocating bidders according to ranking, so as soon as the first share expires, if it's completed, then the second highest steps in, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is what we call the shares, which follows the ranking. The second, especially for implantable devices like cardiac stents and other similar things, which are extremely sensitive, which are very much linked to survival of a patient. We use what we call the medical expert-driven choice. This is a very, say, imperfect translation into English of what we call, or therapeutical choice. So it's basically the surgeon deciding which stent is the one for that particular patient. So since the surgeon has to have the largest possible flexibility in picking the exact stent, we basically, they are allowed to choose whichever supplier they wish. So it's really free choice driven by medical considerations. And the third one, which I cherish very much, because this is really the one that came up from an idea of the research unit, was to say, suppose you have multiple quality features, and you do know that at the second stage, at the call-off stage, public authorities may have different weights attached to each single quality feature. So what we do, we award the first round. So we select a set of awardees, and then we use a sort of a matching mechanism. So basically, public authorities declare their own ranking in terms of weight. And so a very simple, so we don't need any artificial intelligence solution. It's very simple. You can use an Excel file here. This Excel file will match the offers, so and we'll sort of recompute the ranking so as to find the best match according to that particular expression, that particular vector of weights. So since procuring entities may end up having different weights, so you don't know ex ante who's going to be the way you're gonna find out. So the usual criticism that we sort of get from about this mechanism is whether public authorities are in a position to use reverse engineering. So to think about the way the system, the matching mechanism works, so that they can end up choosing not necessarily the best match, but the sort of the awardee, the firm that they like the most. Now, it might be the case, but you can manipulate your preferences under any circumstances. So every single time that I have this conversation with an AUK expert, they come up with this idea of manipulating, as if you could not manipulate framework agreement by manipulating the award criteria in a framework agreement requiring a second round of competition. You can always manipulate. That my point is, you can always manipulate your preferences and attach different ways so as to favor one firm over another. So this story of favoritism is not driven by the algorithm. It's driven by the fact that there is always, discretion in the way you declare your preferences. So economists would say that there is no coherence between your utility function and your ranking mechanism. It's always the case. So we do know that. The best of our knowledge, there might be some case of abuse, but in most circumstances, given that we're using this especially for ICT services. Now we're using this for personal computers, and the last example I want to mention, there is another case which is to me even more interesting, because it's a sort of the fifth case, the case of hybrid framework agreement that we use for extremely large framework agreement for lighting services, for public lighting services. And actually, this is very interesting because we have embedded in the framework agreement actually a PPP contract. So there are ESCOs involved, so it's performance-based. So they have to put investment upfront, and there is a payment which depends upon the level of quality of services delivered to municipalities. And there we have we've found out it was actually the best word to use a hybrid framework agreement, because we do know that large municipalities, may have a large and complex infrastructure, so they need to have a second round of competition because they have to adjust conditions according to the feature of their infrastructure. But in other case, for small municipalities, a direct award, so using the condition coming out from the first stage of the framework agreement would be enough for them. And so we have set an objective criteria, which is the number of lampposts. So if the number of lampposts is below a certain threshold, municipality, they can just use conditions coming out from the framework agreement. Otherwise, if they're above, so basically if the town is in the order is above 50 or 70,000 inhabitants, they will have to have a second round competition. Otherwise, they will just buy by using the fixed conditions. And I think this is it. Hopefully, I've managed to sort of provide you with a survey of, bit of concept of what to do and concrete examples. Thank you for your attention. Here for any curiosity or question. Thank you very much, Mario. Thank you all.
So thank you, Gianluigi. Very, very, very interesting. And as always, the right blending between academic and concrete experience, which is exactly the scope of this seminar. So, any question from the public?
Yes, I have a question. I see on your presentation that you are combining PPP and framework agreements, but in the Italian law, do you need a private entity to fund the equipment? Because in my mind, but perhaps I'm going to explain it. What I suppose, but it's that Consip is doing the framework, the selection, and then there is a contract between the public entity and the economic operators. This is okay.
Exactly. There is, there are the standard features of any PPP. So there are public funds actually coming from Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, which is the big Italian entity providing funding for many public investments. And actually, there was a fund which was specifically tailored to allow SMEs to be involved in consortia in the joint. This is basically a joint venture, a framework of it for joint ventures. So there are normally ESCOs, there are large contractors, and then there are small and medium enterprises providing maintenance services and standard maintenance. So all of them together, they have put money. Some of this money comes obviously from the ESCOs, from the public entities. So it's a standard PPP, which is sort of hidden by, shielded by a framework agreement. But this is the reason why I want to mention this is because there's a sort of tendency, and even in very, I would say, brave countries, to consider a framework agreement as a sort of an environment which you have to confine yourself to buy standardized things. What standardized things are, I never understood, to be honest. Anything can be standardized. Even a tank could be standardized if you're able to define precisely quality features. All I'm saying is that there is more that meets the eye in framework agreements. And I think there is still a vast ocean of unexplored solutions to be grasped and exploited. And I think that the research unit here in Consip, in our conversation with our colleagues, is also, especially at the European level, it's to sort of to convince not only government but also policymakers to stop using all these sentences about framework agreement. If you think of even a DPS, there is the way it's phrased in the directive is oversimplifying. Condition about quantity and possibly price. This is a childish approach to framework agreement. We can do tons of more sophisticated things with framework agreement, keeping the spirit. But I think, practitioners, especially, I would say the more experienced at CPB, should convince policymakers that this is the way. I mean, it's a hard time. It's not easy, but, we will get there.
Yeah.
I'm very optimistic.
Questions? No? So can I pose you might have two questions. One is more technical, but I was interested in knowing what is your policy in general in order to identify contracting authorities, for participating to framework agreements according to Autorità and Simonsen, because it is quite a difficult point in order to you choose the techniques which are provided by the law and also by the court decisions in order to previously identify. There are different possible ways. And then the second question, I just give you both. The second question is more connected to a kind of policy of law, because I think we share your enthusiasm for framework agreements. we are all crazy about framework agreements. But what are the possible legal amendments you are suggesting in order to render to better the legislation and render it easier? So, what would you like to do, which now you cannot do due to the Italian or European legislation?
Well, the UK have already done under the radar, even before Brexit, that big tragedy that and it's, I mean, I'm saying it's a tragedy beside my, leaving my years in UK, which would make me even sadder. But there is a tragedy because the UK was actually one of the most dynamic forces in pushing our European regulation towards something that is not just, the sort of deciding what is good ex ante and then writing laws. This is a standard continental way of having this idea that is an ideally perfect way of doing things, and then you write down the provisions. That there is the trials and errors and experimentation that I've learned actually as I was there, and something, if you don't breathe the air of London or any other EU country, even in Wales or Scotland would be okay, by the way, Northern Ireland, you cannot understand that spirit. So when we joined an EC project, which was, I don't remember the name, it was about public lighting. So Consip was in a joint consortium with the London Radio Authorities, actually with the authority in charge of public transport. So they were renewing the entire lighting system for the tube. And when we had a look at their framework agreement, we were shocked by the way they were actually going around the directive in such a nice way. So in Italy, that would have been killed 25 times. So one of the major tenets in framework agreements, and you have to keep substantially condition fixed throughout the duration framework agreement, which is to me one of the major constraints. So what they did, they let actually suppliers refresh. Because if you're offering some equipment, bulbs and others, and even if you have a 3-year framework agreement or 2-year framework agreement, the technology is going to be evolving. And sometimes even the speed of technology is the unpredictability, and you don't want to kind of rule out the possibility of taking advantage of something popping up just because you have to substantially keep the conditions intact. Okay. So there is a way, from an economic viewpoint, it's very simple. You just announce it. I'm going to put this condition, I'm going to select, 5 out of 10. And mind you guys, you will be allowed to offer, at least to some extent, new stuff that will involve a reshuffling of the ranking throughout the duration. Why not? I mean, from an economic viewpoint, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever. And I managed many times to convince, again, part of the legal academia about the anti-competitive, which doesn't make absolutely any sense. Because if you announce it, if you say this to the world, so your initial conditions are the same. You do know that at the later stage, there would be the possibility of adding some an additional new feature. So what's the point of anti-competitive? Why not having the public authorities benefit throughout those 2 years of this additional thing? And so the question normally is, oh, well, you shouldn't be using framework agreement. But no, I want to exploit the demand aggregation part of the framework agreement, the fact that I can fix some condition with the fact that I can add more condition afterwards. I want the best of the two worlds. I don't want the worst of the two worlds. I want the best of the two worlds. This is one. First question, how do we spot? It's very simple. It's, in Italian, we have this very nice expression of combinato disposto, the joint effect of two provisions. First, a budget law saying all central government authorities must use Consip framework agreement. So it's very easy to start with this because if there is an obligation and you have framework agreement for central, for central government authorities, there are all of them. So it's very easy to describe them because they're all of them. And mind you, let me give you just one example. Yes, I had this discussion with my Hungarian, Lithuanian colleagues that they are kind of worrying, oh, we cannot because our lawyers tell us if we don't make a list of those who are going to use it. So let me give you our experience. We started with that very strong obligation. And guess what? After 10 years, if you see the fraction of users of our framework agreements, 70% of the users are the ones who are not obliged to use them, whereas 30% is central government users. So those who are in principle in a position to use a different option end up using. Why? Because they find better conditions. So, and how do we do that? We say, well, this is a framework which is open to everybody, but we do know that it's mandatory for central government. Sometimes it's only voluntary for local government authorities, which end up buying even more than central government. So there must be a reason why, although we just described them by saying, central and local, we don't seem to experience any problem in terms of, ex ante demand and ex post demand. We have exactly the opposite problem. So we have too much demand given the value of our agreements. I mean, that's exactly the opposite that I've heard in other countries. So sorry for taking too long, but I think these are very thorny issues that, which are actually meat for you guys, especially reforming the provisions on framework agreement.
Okay, we'll ask your wording for the before. Any other question? Yes.
If we have time.
Yes, we have time.
Thank you for very interesting points from your business. I have a technical question because when you let your contracting authorities do a mini competition under one of your framework agreements, how much freedom do you let the contracting authorities have? Because when you have awarded the framework agreement, you have laid down transparent award criteria. And to what extent can the contracting authorities then use their own award criteria? Have you made them take the choice, or have you fixed the award criteria that they have to use under the mini competition?
Okay, so the answer is very simple because we have very few cases of framework agreements in which there is a second round of competition. I mentioned one, so the hybrid case, the public lighting case. Yeah. We normally provide them. So let me put it this way: given our experience and given what we normally do, or the way we think about this, we provide them with a list of additional award criteria. So, and the reason why, I mean, to be honest, it's not because we don't want them to use their imagination, but because they know little about the contract matter, and in any case, much less than we do. And so even if at the time when we started thinking about this, when we introduced framework agreement with second round competition, we got many phone calls especially from the ministry saying, hey, look guys, if you want to be of any use for this country, you have to provide us with an entire list of things that we can use. We cannot let us, alone in the desert. And so this actually has a further, I would say, advantage that since it's in the tender document, so it's public now, so bidders know what are the degrees of freedom that contracting authorities are allowed to use downstream. So that provides an even further leverage for, I'd say, for transparency. So you cannot predict whether the municipality of Rome is going to use 3 out of 5 or 3 out of 10, but at least you know the entire list, which gives you, arguably much information about what may happen afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
That clear? That makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I think we handle it the same way because it's also to ensure, as you say, transparency for the suppliers from the very beginning. Yeah.
Sure, exactly.
Another point, you could actually challenge whether this medical expert assessment, is that really objective? Is that an objective criteria? Because there's some kind of subjective matters because another doctor might find another solution. But actually, we had a case law on that in Denmark, and it was actually acknowledged by the Board of Complaint. And I also think that they are very, they don't like to refuse a doctor's point of view, especially when it comes to health and patients. I think they really keep back. So I think you have a very good point in that kind of objective criteria, even though you could challenge, is that really objective? Because it's based on a personal assessment. But actually, we have case law on that too in Denmark.
So I guess you're Karine, right?
So that's Malene.
She's
No, it's Malene.
Karine is not here. So, sorry, so, no, since you mentioned Denmark, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I cannot see, I mean, all those in the room, in the same room, I cannot see your name, I'm sorry. No, I wanted to just add on this because we've been in touch with SKI for a while, and we had another topic concerning the estimated value of framework agreements. We haven't touched on this because in Italy it's very simple. Now there is a law saying what you can do or you cannot do. So it's very simple. But the point at that time was about the estimated value of dynamic purchasing system. And I was shocked, I mean, to be honest, and if an Italian is shocked about this, that means something. They were afraid, and actually they were advised by their lawyers that because the overall value of the call off had hit that estimated value announced beforehand. In a DPS case, they had to set it from scratch, and I couldn't understand the logic of this because I said, you mean the DPS is.
Stop it. She's the lawyer. She's the lawyer of SKI.
Oh, you're the one. So, well, very well taken. So, I'm really happy I can discuss with you. I couldn't understand why. I mean, a DPS has one feature that makes it profoundly different from a standard framework, which is open.
Yeah.
So, and we do exactly the same. We estimate, a DPS for something to be 1 billion. And then we end up with a demand of, and still there is the window is open. We hit 1.3. So what's the point? All suppliers are already there. So what's the point of?
So I agree with you. Yeah, 2 points. When we did the assessment, I started the same place as you, saying, "Oh, this is just this open procedure, and you do the concrete purchase time by time. So there's no need to have this transparency in the maximum from the very beginning." But our assessment was based on the wording of the directive, on the annexes C to the directives, what has to be informed, what do the suppliers have to be informed about from the very beginning. So it was a very, you could say, connected to the wording of the directives when we did the assessment. Secondly, now the new e-forms have arrived, and I think was it from yesterday that we have to use the new e-forms. And the interesting thing is that there's actually no special column for the maximum on a DPS, but there is for framework agreements. Yeah. So actually SKI was challenging me and saying, what do you think about this? Now we don't have anywhere to write the number and the maximum. Yeah, and the thing is, but it might be the commission that is wrong, because it's still the wording of the directive and the annex C is still the same. But I know it's not written in stone, but it was out of the best interpretation of the wording, actually, because the wording framework.
I agree with you. But the point of a DPS is to make things simpler and quicker. And that was the initial, although the very first DPS in 2004 was badly written because there was this indicative bidding fantasy that the commission came up with and they killed afterwards. But the point of the DPS is to make things faster. So if because of the fact that I have a new call off and I still have 3 months and I have to relaunch a DPS, it violates the DNA of the DPS. So it's a substantial part of it, which makes me crazy. So we're we're sticking to the wording and we're forgetting about why that object was invented. That's my point. Transaction cost argument should prevail over the wording. But since I'm an economist, I may, overlook the
And
subtleties
also the solution, but
of law.
the solution is really easy because you can just put a very high amount. Because normally you would put the duration of the DPS, for example, like 10 years or 20 years, and then you can just put a very high amount, then you are home safe.
Yeah. Well, great. Yeah. Now finally we met.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I know you have a meeting, but if you want to
I can say actually, it turns out that that meeting was canceled.
oh great.
Oh, great.
So you have with us all the morning. Great. Thank you very much. Now, the second report is by Monsieur Olivier Giannoni from UGAP, and please Olivier.
Thank you. It's great pleasure to be with you today. So I'm going to answer to 3 questions. What are the different kinds of framework agreements? How to use it, and to give you some other thoughts about how to practice a framework agreement from a French and UGAP point of view. So to answer the first question, in my mind, there is only 2 types of framework agreements. The first one is a framework agreement with purchase order, and the second one is a framework agreement when you need a call-off contract or a subsequent contract to get some items defined. In the public law, the French public law, it was a little bit difficult at the beginning to introduce a framework agreement because it's not the classical French public law. So according to the different case law, the first framework agreement with purchase order is contract because things and price are defined, and the purchase order is just a way to carry out the framework agreement. And in the second one, when you need a subsequent contract, the framework agreement is only a way to select an economic operator. So it's not a contract. And you have a recent case from the Supreme French Court, which is saying that an economic operator doesn't have a right to get a subsequent contract.
So let's consider that.
Yes, indeed.
So
And
we'll send us with the figure.
no problem. You have 2 questions then, because in fact, these 2 types of framework agreement you can combine horizontally and vertically, because horizontally you can mix and have in the same framework agreement purchase order and subsequent contracts, and vertically because you can get subsequent contract, put purchase order, and or put another subsequent contract if you want. So framework agreement are to be in the same way from concept is something very creative, and you have 2 other questions to answer. Do you need 1 or more economic operators? And do you want to carry out, or do you want not to carry out your framework agreement? Because the main way to do a framework agreement in UGAP is to carry out. And sometimes we don't carry out, but it's an exception. So this is my view and of the framework family, if you want. The second question is, what are the criteria to choose between these different kind of solution? The first one is that UGAP is carrying out. So my first criteria is financial. I need purchase order from a public entity to then pass a purchase order to the economic operator. So it is why we are using framework agreement with purchase order. The second criteria is informatic, because our IT system is creating automatically a purchase order, which is the same that we receive from our clients, because we are going more and more in IT and new technology, and there is a website you get where you can pass a command like in Amazon or other commercial websites. The first criteria is what is the economic structure of the market where I am going to pass this framework agreement, and what are my needs in the carrying out of this contract. If you have few economic operators, perhaps it's good to have most of them in your framework agreement to keep the competition alive. If you have a lot, perhaps you need only one. Other question, is the price of the goods you are buying, is this price is very stable, or is it very a lot of flexibility? And I'm giving you an example. For example, when I am buying paper, we use a framework agreement with subsequent contract because the price of paper is very fluctuant, and you have very few economic operators in the French markets. So we are passing regularly subsequent contract to have a better price for our clients. Another question, is it possible to carry out the subsequent contract? For example, and I think it's the same in concept, when you are buying electricity or gas, it is easier that the central processing power is doing the selection, and then that the public entity are contracting directly with the economic operator. It's why we are not carrying out this contract. Third question, what are the way to, in practice, to make this framework agreement? First, on Simonson, as we are carrying out this framework agreement, it is with the last framework agreement execution that we know the maximum amount, but we are prudent, we are cautious in our contract, and we create a provision to increase the maximum amount during the duration of the framework agreement. The second question was about the duration of framework agreement. I think it's the worst constraint for UGAP. It's the 4 years, because it's a very short time to carrying out this framework agreement. So I think an improve would be to create longer framework agreements, and it is the case when you are an entity with special regulation. I think you can go to 8 years, and this is not the case when you are the common buyers, common public procurement buyers. And you ask how we determine the maximum amount. In the case when we are not carrying out, we ask the public entity with which we are going to pass the framework agreement with a list, what are their consumption, and does they want to go with us or not? So you have a sort of embarkment campaign to know the needs of the public entity. To give some figures about UGAP, we have 5 billion amount of global amount of how to say chiffre d'affaires.
Yes.
I don't know in English.
Fatturato, chiffre d'affaires, gross income.
Revenues.
Revenues.
Yes. And we have 700 economic entity.
So
700. And we have 2,000 contracts alive.
2000.
Yes.
That's okay. Thank you.
Fair question.
Any question? No.
Yes.
More or less ask the same again that you have.
Yeah, but I would like to know. I would like to ask to the maximum amount, because you said that in your contract you include a clause so you can increase your amount.
Yes, indeed.
So if you, for example, in the contract notice you publish, okay, we'll buy 100 million euros, and then if you have an option to increase,
Mhm.
do you include that in your contract notice to make it transparent?
No, it's
In the maximum, or
it's-
is it above the maximum? So you actually have a hidden maximum, so to speak. If we should challenge it from the supplier's point of view, wouldn't they say, oh, it's a hidden maximum because you said 100 million euros, but it's not, because you have an option already from the very beginning to increase.
Yes, but it's in the contract we publish. It's in the so it's not in the notice. It's not, but you can find it in the contract.
But you have to put the amount max in the notice.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
But we don't put the second amount. We put the first because we don't know if we are going to.
Because it's optional.
Yes, it's an
Yeah.
option.
Okay,
But-
interesting.
I also had a question on this point, but more radical perhaps. Why do you put those two different things? So you have a maximum amount, and then you put a clause in order to exercise an option to
Yeah.
increase the amount. I mean, I can understand very well one can do that in a normal procurement contract because that's an option. But if you are in the field of framework agreement, why don't you just put as maximum amount the sum of the two? Because we are not obliged to buy up to the maximum. So I mean, let's say the maximum is 100 and you put an option of 20. So you say the framework agreement is 100 euros, and then if we decide, we can buy for another 20, so 120.
Mhm.
So why don't you just simply say the maximum amount is 120? So you don't have to use the option. It's up to you. You can also buy just 50. You're not obliged to arrive.
To answer to your question, the first one is that we have rules, an internal rules that we have an estimate amount and we multiply by 5 to get the maximum amount. This is the first one. The second one is that we don't know if we have, for example, in the government, we have some buyers who are not predictable. So sometimes we get a big purchase order, we can't predict it. So it's to avoid being without a contract that we put this option. But it's only in certain type of contracts. For example, it's on car because we have a purchase order from the Interior Ministry, which is very, very difficult because it's very political. So it's just a caution in case of.
Sorry, may I ask you, what is the magnitude of that, the additional part? So it's sort of, do you have any bound on this, or so you can say it's 100, the estimated value, and then you put 20% on top. Okay, that 20% comes from what? So you have, could it be 100%, 80%? You know, what is the variance of that extra?
In fact, in European regulation, you must be, when you are doing this kind of provision, you need to be precise. So you have a criteria for use this provision. It's when you are above what we estimate the consumption of the contract, and it's not more than 20% of the maximum amount.
Okay, so it's bounded by 20% in any
Yes.
case. So you
Yes,
use it depending on the type of framework agreement. Sometimes might be, it's always 20%, or sometimes you just need 10%, or you just put it as a safe harbor for, you know, unpredictable events.
It's 20%, but we can adjust the provision, but this is the regular provision, but 20%.
Okay, okay,
Mm.
okay.
And
We've
so
been
just-
discussing this with, sorry, Maria,
Sorry.
it recalls me the discussions we had for years with the anti-corruption authority in Italy, is trying to make the point that there is in our job a physiological level of unpredictability, because we have authorities, as I mentioned, they are forced to buy through us, and others which are not. So there is indeed unpredictability, and so we wanted really to advocate the use of this extra flexibility. And they were like the standard Italian approach. No, you cannot do it. If your demand analysis is very good and very thorough, you will know for sure how much they need, which is a big lie, a lie like 3 kilometers long. But we didn't succeed. So I really envy you, you know, but I think has become, as always, I mean, there is a lot of wisdom even in sort of sad events. So once you know that you are forced to go through a particular line of conduct, that becomes also a very strong signal to suppliers. They do know that is it, so they have to make sense. So this is going to be it. And actually, in Italy now, the 20% can be used only at the call-off stage. So each contract can be amended by that 20%, but you cannot manipulate sort of thing, the overall value framework agreement. So in a way, this is a good signal because it makes a stronger sense, even a stronger signal to the supply market, which is good in terms of offers we get, I mean, to me. Sorry, Mario, to interrupt you, but I think this is an interesting point.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. That's the reason of exchanging experiences. So just to understand, to be sure I've understood. So you say you make some inquiries of the needs, of possible needs of the contracting authorities, just to see how many cars they could need. And then you multiply by 5 the need.
In fact, when we are carrying out the contract, we know the consumption before because we get the data. But we can also ask the public entity if they are going to have extra needs. And with this data, we create the new estimated amount and the new maximum amount.
Yeah, but so I got something as you say we multiply by 5.
Yes, this is to get the maximum amount estimated.
So 5 times the estimation.
Yes.
It's max.
Which is quite large.
Yes.
And plus you are 20%.
Yes.
Oh.
Have you had any case law on the maximum assessment, or do you have any court cases on it?
No, but in fact, there is a Supreme Court case which obligate to put it in the contract before Simonson. So it was quite, we get a little bit nervous, but we don't modify our contract, we don't amend our contract according to this because we thought it's not going to, there is not going to be a litigation about that. But since Simonson, we are very cautious about.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you had case law in it on the subject?
On the maximum,
Yeah.
I am
Absolutely.
not aware.
Yeah, but there's a national case law.
But so I should imagine that in your framework agreement, you never finish, I mean, you never consume all the possible purchases because you multiply by 5 and then you have 20%. So I should imagine that you always have enough availability. You're not in a situation like Concept that they finish very quickly all the supplies. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. But as I say, 4 years is very short. So we try to avoid another constraint with the maximum amount. It's why we are very above.
And that's why you also are suggesting to have a longer period for framework agreement. So let's say 8 years for all, not just for space.
Yes, for example.
And if you reach a maximum quite quickly, it's also a competition between the customers of the GPS. Then it's about being the first one to buy the cars, because if not, the others have bought all the cars.
I like this comment because the military they have found a way to to solve this problem. So they come to our headquarters, and as we open up the catalog, 1 second afterwards, they press the button. They will be the first one.
Exactly. So
That's the way, because there is competition, and
Yeah.
there is also in the healthcare sector for medical equipment.
Yeah.
But Gianluigi, so you were suggesting that in your case, ANAC is forcing you to set a maximum which is more or less compatible with the needs, even if it is not required at all by the Court of Justice decisions.
No, I know, Mario, but that was obviously before the new public procurement law came into force. But no, we were kind of stretching this towards the, I would say, the decency, this decency limit, because we had the 20% more, and then we had, you may recall what we used to define the national lot. So we put a sort of an additional layer. So suppose you have a framework agreement split in geographical lots. So each lot had this 20%, okay? And then we put on the top of this a national lot with an additional 20%. So whereby after you've used 100% and 20%, you could, take the extra share from the national law. So we had a bid which was tailored for the whole, the whole nation. And it was a shortcut to have an additional 20% on top. And I think that ANAC was angry because of that, because we wanted really to use extra flexibility. So, and in fact, I always share this view. I mean, in my role, I couldn't say they were right, but I think they were right in saying that that extra national law was really an abuse of sort of flexibility. Now things are over because we have the new provision and we're fine. But I think we are in a better condition now because the message is stronger. And I think, from economic perspective, stronger message, reduce uncertainty, so make bids better bids, so value for money become better, and suppliers like lower uncertainty. This is what made a framework agreement successful or unsuccessful. The amount of uncertainty which has to be borne by suppliers, given the rules of the game, the lower that amount, the better they are, the better we are. Okay, this is a win-win kind of story.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's right.
Just another point before, it's that we have also other provision in our contract to introduce new goods or new services during the duration. So it could be also a way to improve the appeal of this contract.
Is that what Gianluigi was longing?
Yeah. Very close, very close.
You have to go to work with Luca. But what exactly, what do you mean by new rules? I mean, new rules for the call-offs, or new rules in order to modify the ranking of companies?
No, new rules, a new provision to put your dark computer. You have only dark computer, you can put the other one because it's a new one.
Okay, so exactly what.
No. This is what we call technological evolution, which is already in our. This is completely consistent with provision of standard provision. I'm talking really about something more than that. There is a new bulb with a new technology in it, and this will affect substantially the way you evaluate the offers at the first stage. So you would require, in fact, you have to have a sort of a standing evaluation committee in order to reshuffle the ranking as, improvements step come in. So this is a little bit more than what we're, because this fact, in PC and this is already taken care of. I'm talking of a step, further than that. It's a customer in the UK. In the UK, they do this and they're perfectly fine, even under the
Denmark?
Could that be possible maybe under a DPS? Maybe that could be the solution, because there you haven't fixed all the technical specification beforehand. So maybe that could be the future.
That it's I think we would need one more workshop on this, because our interpretation, but this is a legal interpretation. These are legal constraints coming from my own colleagues, which are in any case a lot more adventurous than our anti-corruption authority. The anti-corruption authority is very adamant in saying that you have to set beforehand all the award criteria, and you don't have to leave contracting authorities with any imagination in coming up with fancy, quality award criteria at the call-off stage. I agree with you, but then it seems to me actually more appropriate, because since a DPS is open by genetic nature, that would accommodate quite easily for additional, but it would deserve more discussion. I agree. I mean, I would be tempted to follow you along this line.
Yeah, I agree. I think you should do more research on it. What can be under the award criteria, and how much can you change in the technical specification? But I think there would be more room for that compared to a framework agreement. And then it's just how can you actually do it? Yeah.
It's actually interesting with DPS, because if you look into the wording of the directive, it is a little bit more strict than framework agreement, where you have to publish it. But on the other hand, it's more flexible in the wording regarding what the wording says something about the possibility to make amendments or something like that. And so there is a difference in the wording. And it's strange, because you shouldn't have a difference between DPS and call-off with multiple suppliers. It doesn't make any sort of like, it doesn't give any meaning that there should be a change in that. We should have another workshop on DPS at some point. I'll send you all the chapter I just wrote on DPS, because we seem to be going in that direction as well. That will be published soon. It's not quite finished, but it's ready for the publisher, and then it should be ready for all the people as well. And I have a few questions also regarding France, because you were saying, if I'm not mistaken, said 2,000 framework agreements. It's really, I'm thinking that's really many framework agreements you have, and I was wondering whether you sort of like tend to sort of like have smaller framework agreement instead of having framework agreement with many lots, or how
it depends on the domain of where you are buying, because in health we need a lot of lots because there's a lot of small economic operators, and for example in informatics you need few because there is big firm. So we have a lot of data on that, and I can share it with you, of course, but it depends on where you are buying, in fact, the numbers of your framework agreements.
Yeah, because I think maybe we have a tendency to, establish one for cars, and then we have different types of cars in this.
But it depends if you are searching for a specific technical solution. For example, we have a lot of questions from French government to get French bus maker. So we want to find him to go in the right way. You see that there is economic, and you have to find a way to be okay with everybody.
Yeah.
And then another question I had was regarding the estimates. It's just well, now we're talking estimates of the overall framework agreement, but, and maybe that's also a question to you, Jean-Louis, is there also any sort of like national requirements or case law saying that you have to estimate or maximum on sort of like the different lots or the different types of purchases, or are you only looking at the overall framework agreement? You know what I mean? You have the framework agreement, that's what.
My question to you is whether you're asking whether we have additional requirement coming from, say, our anti-corruption authorities. I would say no. I mean, the warden, I mean, I've been contaminated by you guys. I'm the warden, and I'm the warden of our public procurement law. No, I have to mention this because the warden is okay, but as an economist, I want to twist and, and trash the warden so as to reach the goal that I found in the best interest of the public sector. The warden is to me a constraint. So as an economist, I want to be as free as possible to choose. But I do know that warden is about interpretation. And we've been witnessing evolution interpretation in an amazing way. So this is one point. The public procurement law now requires contracting authorities to write down, to make it explicit, the logic of the way the contract is split in two laws. So let's apply this to CPB. For CPB, we do have the logic of the overall amount. And this is, for us, it's basically an exercise of estimating final leads by those who are forced to buy through us and others who may buy through us. Okay, so it's a learning process. We have learned over the years to sort of know where we're going to go. And in general, the more we put on the table, the more they eat. Okay, this is what we've learned, especially in the past 6 years. The lot it's a fairly different business because lot is about entering in a deeper detail how many contracting authorities are here and there, especially when you split a contract into geographical lots. So you have to split the contract so as to understand, where are central authorities. Normally we have the lot of Lazio. Lazio is the region of Rome, which is in principle the biggest lot. Why? Because most of central government authorities are here. So normally this lot is one of the biggest. And then we have to look at, who are the most faithful, blah, blah, blah. But then there is the feature, if you go back to my picture, there is the feature of the supply market. Where are firms located? Is logistic important in these? And so the splitting, the tailoring of lots will depend upon all these matters, which have absolutely nothing to do with the wording of law. It's just economic analysis and, crossing supply and demand features. So as a CPB, we're always held accountable and there is a thorough analysis. We have a very confidential document, which is called our strategic approach to a particular market, which is in principle a document with 60 slides and 20, well, at least 10 of those slides are devoted to the logic used for splitting our framework agreement in two lots. Make all those points about who are the SMEs, where they are, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. But this has nothing to do with the provision of law. So it's a preemptive strategy so that if we are challenged, we do have a document written before publishing the framework agreement to be taken to court by saying, hey guys, this is the logic we use. Now, just, challenge this logic. And in most cases, we're fine.
Okay.
We have a dispute with one of our economic operators because we made a mistake in the estimate of the when we launched the framework, we multiplied by 10 so he was not very happy with that. But in the French public law, there is only one constraint: is the minimum amount. So we told him, too bad for you, it's not possible to refund you. and we don't give you any money. So, but it's not in the court yet. But
They might take it to court.
yes, but I think we are going to win. If, yeah.
Sorry, no, but the only constraining is the minimum, you say,
Yes, because
constraining, I mean.
for me,
for
as a central purchasing body,
So you have a minimum which has to
No.
be guaranteed.
we don't put minimum because it's not an obligation, and we don't want.
If you put, it is,
Yes.
but since you don't put it,
Yes, indeed.
I understand that. And the maximum is not binding, that's what the idea of framework agreement, that is not the
Yeah.
maximum. No, the maximum,
The maximum is binding, but
Yeah.
not the estimates.
the maximum is binding,
But not the estimated value.
but not the estimates. Okay, and so, yes, you can multiply by 100, and there is no problem. So that's something which, as far as now, is compatible under European law, because of course Simonsen only said you have to set the maximum. That didn't say the maximum has to be the result of an estimate. They just say you have to set the maximum. That's why it is possible to use, to trickle with a
But
maximum.
that was challenged in Danish law, but I'll return on that. We had a case on that where they say, no, this maximum, it's far too high, you can't do that. But I'll
And
return.
you don't want to tell us, you don't
Not
want to
yet.
spoil us.
Exactly, that would be a spoiler.
After coffee, yeah.
Now we have-
That's a cliffhanger.
now we have coffee. So see you in 15 minutes, more or less, okay?
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Okay.
Send et kapitel ud til Jacob.
First,
I'm going first.
yeah, first.
So